Ladies and gentlemen, there comes a point in your life where holding on starts to hurt more than letting go, a moment where the space you've been keeping for someone else becomes the very reason you feel stuck. Tonight, I want to speak to the part of you that's exhausted from trying, the part that's still hoping someone will change, see you, or choose you. But more than anything, I want to remind you, sometimes the bravest thing you'll ever do is walk away from what's not choosing you back. Not because you're giving up, but because you're making space for something better, space for someone who's been waiting for room in your life. There comes a moment in every relationship, romantic or otherwise, where you find yourself at a crossroads. It's the moment when someone doesn't respond the way you hoped, when they start to pull back, grow cold, or suddenly act indifferent, and in that moment, a quiet panic sets in. You think, maybe I need to do more, say something better, be more impressive, more attractive, more lovable. You start overthinking your every move, replaying conversations, rewriting texts before you send them, wondering what you missed, what you said wrong, or how you can fix what you don't fully understand. That's where the trap begins, because somewhere deep down, without realizing it, you start to believe that love, attention, or validation must be earned. That if someone isn't seeing your value, the only logical response is to prove it. To fight for it, to explain yourself, you become caught in this loop of effort, reaching, waiting, trying harder, thinking that if you just do the right thing, say the right words, show the right version of yourself, they'll suddenly recognize what you've known all along, that you're worth choosing. But here's the truth that often gets buried under the noise of fear and insecurity. Your value doesn't need to be proven to the right person. It doesn't need to be explained, advertised, or constantly reminded. When someone truly sees you, really sees you, there is no performance necessary. They don't need to be sold on your worth because they feel it in your presence. The problem is, we live in a world that teaches us the opposite. We're conditioned to market ourselves on dating apps, social media, even in conversations. We're taught to compete for attention, to make ourselves more appealing, to adjust based on what the other person wants. And so we start to tie our value to our ability to convince. We think, if I'm good enough, they'll stay. If I'm impressive enough, they'll choose me. But real love, real connection, and real respect don't operate on that currency. They're not attracted to the performance. They're drawn to the presence, to the quiet confidence of someone who knows who they are, even when someone else doesn't. It's a radical thing to believe that you don't need to chase, fix, or prove. That you can walk away from someone who doesn't choose you without feeling like a failure. That you can release the need to be understood by everyone and still be whole. And yet, that belief is what frees you from the exhausting cycle of over-efforting. That belief is what puts you back in your power. Think about it. When you feel the need to prove your worth to someone, what you're really saying is, I don't believe they see it, so I need to compensate. But the very act of trying to prove your worth often makes people sense that you doubt it yourself. Confidence doesn't come through how loudly we speak about ourselves. It comes through how little we feel the need to. People are drawn to certainty, not desperation. They're drawn to authenticity, not persuasion. There's something magnetic about someone who doesn't need to be chased, doesn't beg to be chosen, doesn't plead to be seen. Not because they're cold or arrogant, but because they've done the inner work, because they've sat with themselves in silence long enough to realize their value isn't up for negotiation. It just is. If someone doesn't recognize what you bring, it's not your job to turn on a spotlight. It's not your job to teach them how to value you. You're not an idea that needs convincing. You're a person, not a pitch. The irony is, the less you feel the need to prove your worth, the more others begin to feel it. Not because you're doing anything different externally, but because your energy is rooted in a place of self-trust. You're no longer operating from fear. You're grounded, present, real. People remember how you make them feel. And the way you carry yourself speaks louder than any words ever could. So when you stop over-explaining, stop over-giving, stop chasing, you're not giving up. You're just making space, space for mutuality, for clarity, for people who don't need to be persuaded to appreciate you, because the people who truly value you already do. There's something quietly powerful about someone who walks into a room and doesn't need to dominate it. Someone who doesn't try to impress with loud words or perfect lines, but instead leaves a mark just by being present. That power isn't found in the way they look or speak or dress. It comes from something deeper. It comes from self-confidence. Confidence isn't about thinking you're better than anyone else. It's not arrogance, it's not ego, and it's definitely not pretending to be untouchable. Real confidence is knowing who you are, even when things around you are uncertain. It's trusting yourself enough to stay grounded, especially when you're tempted to act from insecurity. Attraction has little to do with how perfect you are. It has everything to do with the energy you give off when you're being yourself. People are drawn to people who are comfortable in their own skin, not because they have it all figured out, but because they're not trying to be anything other than who they are. In dating, this plays out constantly. You can spot it in the way someone speaks, the way they listen, the way they react when things don't go exactly as planned. A confident person doesn't chase validation. They already have it internally. And that's the kind of energy that makes people curious. It makes them lean in because they don't feel pressured or manipulated. They feel safe, intrigued, even inspired. It's easy to confuse attraction with performance. You think you need to say the right thing, dress a certain way, have the perfect timing or strategy. But what draws people in on a deeper level is authenticity. When you're self-assured, you stop trying to be liked by everyone. You start showing up as someone worth knowing, not someone desperate to be chosen. That's why real attraction doesn't begin with the other person. It begins with you, with how you see yourself. Because if you don't believe you're enough, you'll start bending. You'll adjust your personality to keep someone interested. You'll stay silent when you should speak up. You'll tolerate what makes you uncomfortable just to keep the peace. And in doing that, you lose the very thing that makes you magnetic, your center. Self-confidence means you don't rush. You're not chasing someone's approval on the first date. You're not afraid to express a boundary. You're not looking at someone else to fill the gaps you haven't learned to fill on your own. You're not constantly overthinking what to say next because you're more focused on being real than being perfect. And the best part, that kind of confidence gives the other person permission to relax too. When someone sees that you're secure in yourself, it creates space for them to do the same. There's no hidden agenda, no pressure, no game. Just two people showing up with honesty and presence. Of course, confidence isn't something you fake your way into. It's built, it's grown, it's earned through experience and self-awareness. Sometimes it means being alone long enough to understand your own needs. Sometimes it means walking away from someone who doesn't see your value, even when it hurts. Sometimes it means staying true to yourself when it would be easier to blend in. You don't build confidence by being perfect. You build it by proving to yourself over and over that you can survive rejection, disappointment, silence, and still show up with dignity. That you can stay grounded even when your emotions are storming. That you can speak your truth and not shrink in the face of discomfort. People aren't drawn to perfection. They're drawn to presence. To honesty, to that spark in someone who isn't afraid to take up space, not because they want attention, but because they've stopped hiding who they are. So when you wonder what makes someone truly attractive, it's not a strategy, it's not a look, it's not a performance, it's that calm, steady flame of someone who trusts themselves, who doesn't need to chase, impress, or convince, who shows up as they are. and lets the right people be drawn in naturally. Letting go isn't easy. It never has been, especially when your heart is still holding on to a version of something you believed could have been beautiful. We cling not just to people, but to ideas, potential, unfinished stories. There's this part of you that wants to hold on just a little longer, because maybe if you try harder, wait a little more, explain things better, something will finally shift. They'll finally see you, choose you. Change for you, but deep down you already know the truth. Holding on has stopped feeling like love. It's started feeling like self-abandonment. There's a fear that if you let go of them, of the hope, of the story, you'll be left with nothing. That letting go is a loss. But what we don't always realize is that by gripping so tightly to the wrong person, we block ourselves from receiving what's meant for us. Because you can't open your hands to catch something new when they're still full of everything that's already gone. Sometimes we stay out of habit, sometimes out of fear. We tell ourselves, what if this is as good as it gets? Or what if I never find this again? But you don't need to keep choosing pain just because it's familiar. You don't have to keep investing in someone who's never truly shown up for you. Letting go is not about bitterness. It's not about pretending it didn't matter or that you didn't care. It's about honoring what was, and then honoring yourself enough to stop living in the shadow of it. It's about recognizing that love, real, mutual, healthy love, shouldn't require you to lose yourself just to keep someone else. And letting go doesn't mean you stop loving them immediately. It just means you love yourself enough to stop chasing something that's not loving you back. It means you stop asking for the bare minimum. You stop rereading old messages to feel something that once was. You stop replaying conversations, trying to find the moment you went wrong, because this isn't about where you went wrong. This is about where you're still holding yourself back. When you let go, you create space, emotional space, mental space, spiritual space. You remove the noise. You clear the clutter of confusion and mixed signals. You make room for clarity, for peace, for alignment. You begin to breathe again. You begin to heal. And most importantly, you make space for the right people to walk in. The ones who won't leave you questioning your worth. The ones who won't be hot and cold, who won't need you to earn love like it's a reward for performance. The ones who meet you with the same energy you bring. No chasing, no begging, no second guessing. But they can't come in if your world is still full of ghosts, if your heart is still occupied by someone who only shows up halfway, if your thoughts are still wrapped in memories that don't reflect your present. Sometimes we ask for love while still holding hands with someone who's already let go, and then we wonder why love doesn't arrive. There's a strength in letting go that people often underestimate. It takes courage to walk away when your heart still aches. It takes clarity to say, this isn't enough, even when you wish it were, but that's the kind of strength that changes everything. It tells the universe, and more importantly, yourself, that you are no longer available for halfway love, that you are no longer interested in people who only come close when it's convenient. When you let go of what's not choosing you, you step into your power, you stop waiting, you stop shrinking, and you start becoming the version of yourself that your future relationships will thank you for. The version of you who doesn't chase, but attracts, who doesn't tolerate, but chooses, who doesn't settle, but trusts, because the right people, they don't need to be chased. They don't need you to beg for consistency. They just show up, and when they do, you'll realize that letting go was never the end. It was the clearing, the space your heart needed to be ready, truly ready, for what was always meant to find you. Letting go doesn't mean you failed. It doesn't mean you loved any less. It simply means you've finally chosen to stop fighting for someone who stopped fighting for you a long time ago. And in that choice, in that quiet moment of release, you reclaim your energy, your worth, and your peace. The space you just created by letting go, that's where the right person will feel welcome, not because you chased them, but because you finally stopped chasing the wrong one.